When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 29. Really, I say this on almost every episode, but I can't believe that we're whizzing through into the 30s already. So this is the last one in the 20s, and we've got a good one today. We have got a gentleman all the way from New York City, and he's a guest that certainly comes from an entrepreneurial background. After successfully launching his first business at 18, just 18, he found he had a skill for building business process alongside the marketing of those businesses. He adopted a philosophy that marketing is a part of everything, where marketing is approached as part of every business process from product development to accounts, which certainly from my experience of working in corporate land goes against my knowledge of things. Marketing seems to sit somewhere on its own. It's from this philosophy and his years consulting businesses in Arizona that he fell in love with the many different ways that social media can be used to flood the marketing machine with rocket power. As social media evolved, he continued to explore the new networks and tools that came along with the changing landscape until joining Renegade, an agile social media agency in New York City in 2012. Next year, 2013, he published his book, You Get What You Give, on social media principles and strategies for companies and brands of all size. But it's not all work, as in his free time, he brews his own beer and travels extensively with his wife. He states that he's a geek and always enjoys a good strategy board game, and you'll also find me in the mix wearing funky socks. So what do I start with? First the socks or his amazing business acumen? Well, let's just start by introducing you to the one and only Merlin U. Ward. How are you today, sir?
Doing well, David. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I'll be honest, you're the first Merlin I've ever met.
Actually, I hear that quite often. So I hope that I'm a good Merlin that you've last met, and I don't put a bad flavor in your mouth about the name.
No, it's a fascinating name, isn't it? Obviously, your first thought is of the wizard and stuff, but is it a name that comes through your family? Was your dad called Merlin and your uncle and whatever?
No, actually, it comes exactly from what your first thought was. My mother was reading Camelot when she was pregnant and thought Merlin was a good name, and went with it.
And how have you felt about it? Has it been difficult going through school and that, being a Merlin?
Actually not. No one really seems to tease the Merlin. Throughout school, I got the occasional "do you do magic tricks," but never teasing or extensive teasing, which is surprising because I was somewhat of the outcast in the younger years of schooling. Didn't really grow up until high school, but throughout the whole period, I never really was a victim of any teasing or bullying. Internet was just coming out then, no cyberbullying on my end either, so it worked out really well, the name.
No, I think it's a fantastic name. Have you ever been?
Thank you.
I won't keep on going on about it, but have you ever been in a room when you've met another Merlin?
Only once. I was running a conference in Arizona, and one of our speakers was Merlin Mann of the many folders. I think it's 41 folders is his gig.
Yeah.
And he was there, and it was kind of odd to speak to another Merlin, and I think we both kind of felt that way about it. So we had some light conversation and then kind of went our separate ways to go be our unique selves again.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a doctor's surgery once, probably about 10, 15 years ago. And I don't know if they have the same thing in American doctor surgeries, but they will you all sit in chairs sort of waiting, and then they will shout out the name for the person. Now they sort of do it with an electronic scoreboard kind of thing that you just see your name come up silently. But in these days, they would shout out the name. And they shouted out, "Is there a James Bond?" Which is, quite a strange name to have. And we all turned round, and there was 2 James Bonds in the place, and they both got up and were so surprised to see the other James Bond, like it had never happened in their life. And we was all surprised to see not just one James Bond but 2 James Bonds. And it stuck with me that a name like that, which is quite a normal name, obviously it's got the movie connotations, can cause such a ripple every time it's mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I would love to meet a James Bond. There's a lot of fun you could have with that one.
Well, you could, couldn't you? Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So getting on to your life, you started your first business at the age of 18. I wouldn't have known how to have started a business. I can't even start a business now. I'm 44 years old. How do you go about it at the age of 18? Is it an idea that you come up with and you blindly follow it through, or was there more of a structure to it?
To be honest, at 18, I probably didn't really know how to start my own business, but I did it and learned quite a bit from it. I would say that if you ever want to learn how to do a business, you should just start trying to do one, because the learning curve you'll have is extensively steep, but it can come with quite a lot of benefits. Not everyone is so successful as they are written up. So even Zuckerberg had attempted a few different things before he landed on Facebook, and so I like to kind of revel in my failures, and while that one wasn't completely a failure, we did a lot of things wrong, both on financial end, business process wise. There was just some key decisions we had made that were just horrible in hindsight, but we had a lot of advisors on our side. We connected with a lot of really good people that were entrepreneurial and had some experience in either running businesses as CEOs or were entrepreneurs themselves, and that helped a lot. I wish sometimes I had heeded their advice a little bit more closely. We made some expensive decisions, as I'd mentioned earlier, in the early stages of the business, but kind of worked it out, smoothed it over, and so by 20, I actually got the opportunity to exit that business, not making a whole lot of money, but had successfully done it, exited, and started to move on to the next thing, where with the kind of a closer passion.
And what was the business, the 18-year-old business?
We wanted to start well, I guess I'll start with the problem. So the problem in Arizona was that DUIs were becoming very, very expensive for people, and they were starting to crack down a lot on drinking and driving. And so we wanted to solve that problem kind of in a sustainable way, very socially responsible business. And at that time, that was kind of a thing. It was a way to position yourself. So we went that route, and we started a livery service, so essentially picking up people at their homes, taking them out. And we had a unique way of scheduling it where we would have one vehicle scheduled for a couple different parties that kind of overlapped, but would hover around the area and pick up and drop off people as they wanted to move around. We struck deals with the different locations and the nightclubs and the bars, though they would get discounts if our members arrived in the cars. And then subsidized the program with advertising from a number of different organizations that had similar vision and ending the issue with DUIs, and then also the bars themselves wanted to entice people to come, so they'd advertise with us as well.
That seems huge. It seems huge. It seems huge for now, but at the age of 18, there's too many areas. I think that, well, I as I say at the beginning, I couldn't have pulled that off, and I don't know many people that could pull it off. Does it just give you confidence to go on to more and more things?
Absolutely. I think, the cliche being knowledge is power. We learned a lot in that business. I learned, for one, that the business model that we had was too complex. It wasn't direct enough. We were subsidizing a program with advertising and running advertising, selling advertising as a whole business on itself. Running a livery service is a business on itself, and we tried to smash them together and thinking we could manage the whole thing ourselves. And it really turned out that it wasn't that easy. And it really started us off slowly, especially since neither of us were, my partner and I were salesmen, so it made it difficult on that end. We had the benefit of emerging social media, so we had like Facebook and Twitter, and we're using that to some extent, but it wasn't with our market. It wasn't that solidified yet. They weren't using it in the way that people use Twitter and Facebook now. So it was just kind of have a presence and awareness. The best marketing that we ended up doing was a kind of event-based, where we went to different rallies where more like MAD might be. We weren't allowed to associate with them, but we could hang out in the same room with them. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot learned with that business. And when it came to moving on to the next one, I knew some key things. I wanted to be simple, have a focus, kind of the Jim Collins hedgehog concept. And then also wanted to work on something that was a true passion of mine. So while the business that we started was something that I enjoyed, I think my heart probably wasn't in it 100%. It was 80% of the way there. And when it comes to running a business, you really have to have 110% of yourself into it. And so I pursued things afterwards that were closer to my passion in the realm of marketing, which I actually discovered with this first business. So I don't think without that I would have. I don't think I would have ended up in the place that I am today. And certainly not in the market that I am now with social media and marketing.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Because the theme of the show is Join Up Dots, where we will be looking at the iconic speech by Steve Jobs back in 2005. But one of the things that has been coming out of so many of the conversations, that your failures or your dark points or your weaknesses, actually, when you look back on them, are the positives. That you can't see it at the time because you're all involved in it. But once you actually look back on it, you think, yes, I couldn't have gone to where I am now without going through what I perceived as a bad time. And you feel that way exactly.
Yeah, I think, they use the analogy quite a bit too when developing businesses. They say, you need to know what you're not going to do, and you need to know what you are going to do. And failures, in a lot of ways, tell people exactly what they don't want to do anymore. Not necessarily that they need to avoid those spaces, but be able to fill in those holes in different ways. And so for me, the things that went wrong in the past gave me a lot more focus on the things that I did want to do, or hone in on the things that I was good at and do them better. So it really helped me specialize myself in a way in my skills to create better businesses for the future.
So did you never want to be an employee? Did you never sort of come out of college or university or wherever you went and just go into a job?
Yeah, in my early years as an entrepreneur, I kind of shunned the employees and the employee mindset. I think I pinned them as drones, kind of, so to speak. But in hindsight, I might have been a little bit of an extremist. I do see entrepreneurial values in a lot of people, whether they work for companies or they're on their own, doing their own thing. It's more of a mindset and kind of a practice to life than anything else. So there are people that are content with going to work and pushing the papers and mining the mines and doing those jobs. But I think there are also a lot of people who are in those areas of work that aspire for a lot more and just don't know how to get there, don't realize that the passion they have is one that a lot of other people might have and that they can share and learn about and possibly prosper from. There is that notion of kind of the entrepreneurial awakening within a person, but I don't necessarily think that being an employee is a bad thing. I'm currently employed with another company, and it isn't an entrepreneurial environment. It's a smaller team. It's a very agile environment for us. We're exploring a lot of new things, trying new ways of doing things, and that's the entrepreneurial environment, whether it's being an employee or the owner.
I got to the point of becoming an entrepreneur for the first time. This is the first time ever that I haven't been an employee. And I think my downfall was reading blogs and looking at how people were living their life with an element of freedom that I certainly didn't have. And if I wanted to go and see my kid in a school play, I basically had to cough up a lung to sort of be able to get out of it. But then I saw other people conducting business in the park and on the beach on a mobile phone, on a laptop and stuff. And it was that sort of logic of this is what you can do if you focus in that direction that I think actually convinced me that the entrepreneur route was where I should be going into. But I'd never considered it. I'd always been an employee, and probably 80% of the time was happy being one.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of the awakening that I was talking about. Is you are content, and you had aspirations for something greater, and just needed to realize the potential, and kind of the glimmering light to give you that pathway to get there.
So where is the pathway for people? Is somebody sitting out there listening to this, and they're on the bus or they're on the train, and they're thinking, I'd really like to do something. I don't really like to be in my job anymore. Is the easiest option going online?
Not necessarily. My side passion is brewing beer, and someday I would love to make money brewing beer or experimenting in that industry. That is not an online industry. That is manufacturing for the most part. It's a production line. It needs warehouse space. So no, I don't. You don't need to go online. There's a lot of people making stuff and selling it without an online presence at all. If you wanted to pursue an e-commerce solution as part of what you do, that's great. But it's really only one medium for marketing and sales. It's not the end all be all. Do I think that a lot of companies might be missing out if they're not online? Absolutely. But you definitely don't need to be.
It's funny, we've got a family business, and we've got a car spares, car parts accessories shop, and it's been going for 35 years. And until about a year ago, 2 years ago, we've had no website. It was just word of mouth. And it's been ticking on for 35 years and going great guns compared to other shops that have come and gone. And I convinced my parents that we had to have a website. And so they wasn't convinced. Anyhow, I bought one. And it is amazing how the business has changed, that people within a mile radius of us have been coming in saying, never knew you were here. I have never known you was here. I would have used you all the time, just because you suddenly get an online presence. For brick and mortar, it's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah, like you said, your company was doing well without the online presence. With a little bit more elbow grease and footwork, you probably could have gotten that 1 mile radius as well, sending out flyers and such. But I think as more behavior for consumers is to Google it, an online presence will definitely help, and it could accelerate growth. Absolutely.
I actually remember the very first time somebody said to me, Google it. I have a very strong memory about being at a desk and a chap saying to me, why don't you use this new search engine, Google? And I said, what's Google? And he said, I've just been playing around with it. It seems pretty good. And that was probably about 2002, something like that. And it's amazing how you say that now. Just Google it, and it's just become, what every single person has done. Why do you think, just getting onto Google, why do you think that, out of all the search engines, took over?
Well, they definitely had a revolutionary way of approaching search. I don't know the exact details, but at the time it was more based on traffic for the most part, and Google kind of switched up the game and evolved into being more relevancy based. And so the way of thinking about search was different with the Google engine, and that, I think, got a lot of people intrigued by it. And as it proved to be honestly a better resource, then it's when it really started to catch on. It's Google it. It's what Yahoo's always wanted. Yahoo's always wanted to be a verb, and I don't think they've ever achieved that. And even looking at the sites today, Yahoo, while it's gotten a little sexier, content-wise on the homepage, it's been the same for 10 years, and whereas Google has been able to achieve everything with a simple homepage, and it's just that clean thinking that keeps Google ahead, I think.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing to it, is it? Other than the sort of little Google bit changing on a daily basis. Sometimes the things like Pac-Man that take my time and drag me away from what I should be doing. But there really is nothing to it. It's the simplest of the simplest.
Yeah, absolutely. And even that, the changing logo is a fairly new innovation for Google.
Oh, it's not something that's been going on forever. In my head, it seems like that's always been part of it.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it didn't start until a couple of years after they had launched. That, they were still working through the algorithm and figuring out revenue models and such before they even got to celebrating great parts of history through Google logo.
So if we step back and actually sort of start connecting the dots of your life, and I'm going to play the Steve Jobs speech in a moment because I think it has huge relevance. What are the key dots, if you look back, that have really directed you to where you are now? Was it simply taking continued action and you naturally sort of found your path through, or were there actual key moments that directed you to being the social person that you are now?
Obviously, the first big dot would be that first business and the many things that we did in that. It was through that business that I learned to love the idea of building business processes, which really got me intrigued by entrepreneurship even more. I was already intrigued, I guess, but I fell in love with it at that point. And then I really learned a lot about marketing in that as well, because we were trying to solve two problems at once, as I said, with the kind of complicated business model that we had. And both parts where they were falling short was marketing, was sales of the memberships and sales of the actual marketing. So we had to focus on fixing those parts. And in doing that, I really learned to love marketing and what it could do, and the idea of mass segmentation and big data and things like that. Social media from then started to grow, and I saw a lot of opportunity in that. I was also being mentored by a woman who introduced me to Twitter for the very first time, only a few months after it had even launched. She was traveling back and forth from Arizona to the Bay Area, and spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. So she was kind of on the cutting edge of all these new technologies and softwares and kind of the tech bubble. And she introduced me a lot to those parts. So having her in my life was another big dot. And then moving on from there, I think it was just trial and error. It was lots and lots of little dots where I was trying certain things and if it worked, I continued with it. If it didn't, I tried to fix it or abandon it, depending on what my evaluation was. The other bigger dot, I guess, would be, just before moving to New York, 3 years before moving to New York, I started an agency of my own. So it was part of that consulting. From the consulting came this agency, and I focused on only social media. And that was another big dot for me, where I got to hone in on just that one part of marketing. And I got to hone the idea of the marketing as part of everything, and putting social media into other areas of business where people weren't thinking about it. So, in Arizona, I was one of the first people suggesting that they should put their Facebook and Twitter profiles on their invoices, the URLs, and let people know where they are. And now you see them all over the place. They're on TV ads, they're on billboards. And so I think that was another part of a big dot for me, is converging into becoming a better marketer, and especially on social media. And then I decided for a long time I wanted to live in New York, so I picked up and left and came to Renegade, and that was another kind of a big dot, joining that, and continued to hone from there. I started writing that book that I published last year while in Arizona, and had the opportunity to finish it here with a lot of the learnings and practices that I tested moving forward with Renegade. And I guess that was another medium-sized dot. And moving forward, who knows? Like, as you say, there isn't a way to really see all the dots before you get there. You have a kind of an idea of the minefield that you might encounter, but you don't necessarily know which ones will be the movers and the shakers.
Which is the fascinating path, isn't it? You've just got to go with gut and trust yourself and just keep on taking action. And some of those, so balls you're going to hit out the park, and others you're just going to swing and miss madly, but you learn from them, don't you? And that's what I'm trying to get over to people, that it's not the fear of failure, it's the fear of starting, which is the bad thing. Anyone can have failures, but you learn from the failures, and you possibly learn more from the failures than your successes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of alluding back to what I had said before, with the failures being defining moments. You learn a lot from successes, but you don't learn how to replicate those successes unless you had failures, because you have to know what not to do.
I used to do training courses, and I used to do training courses in the City of London, and on certain courses I became very good at doing them. So when I had the feedback, and you always used to have to do the sort of happy sheet at the end when you handed it around and everyone sort of ticked at stuff, it always used to come back with a glowing report. And I became really dismissive, because I just thought, oh, we're only saying that because I'm in the room. So I tried to do sort of loads of different ways of getting honest feedback to myself, because I ultimately wanted the critical one, because I felt that's the only way that I could develop, by actually having somebody say to me, no, you missed a beat there, it wasn't as good as everybody else was saying. And I never considered it as a failure. I considered it as my opportunity to learn and develop my skills even further.
Yeah, and that's really the way that you should approach that, unless unless it's obviously an aggravated critical feedback. But yeah, you have to see the failures as an opportunity to refine what you're good at, to make yourself great at it. And if you're not looking for those opportunities, you might just continue moving forward in kind of a mundane way, and the next thing you know, you're mediocre and nobody cares.
Absolutely. I'm going to play Steve Jobs' speech, as I do pretty much every show, and then I'm going to ask your opinion on this and whether it has any relevance to you in your past life, which I think we've already proved it has. But let's see what he had to say.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
What do you think about those words, Merlin?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. To say those words, Steve Jobs would have to come to terms with the moments in his life where he was wrong. And I think that's part of what you were just saying, is you have to know when you're wrong, and be able to accept it, not dismiss it, and grow from it. And that's kind of how you get to the next dot, whatever that might be. Looking backwards, you learn that. And so I'll give you a great example. When it comes to the things that went wrong in my first startup, I didn't realize those things until years later. Literally, I think it was one day I was just sitting about in my house. I was reading something online or an article on a new startup, and I started to think about mine. And then it just kind of clicked, and I'm like, holy crap, I did that wrong. I did this wrong. I did that wrong. And then I kind of heard my mentors' voices in my head, and they're like, wow, they all told me that was going to go wrong. And I wish I had just listened more. And, moving forward, I need to keep that in mind, that there's certain stuff that you just have to consider. They say when you're going to do a new business, you're going to leap out and do something. You got to figure it's going to take twice as long and cost 3 times as much. And while we had that in our business model, we accounted for that. There were other things that come along in that frame of mind that you don't consider, and that is some of the critical decisions you need to make. And you don't realize what's critical and what's not until you've made that decision, and you kind of have to go with your gut and hope that that's the right direction. And I think part of what was missing from that little clip of the speech is that it really comes down to values. It comes down to what you believe in, what you consider important. And if you're chasing the money, then all your decisions are going to be based on, will this give me more profit, which hopefully doesn't affect your personal relationships. But then there's the flip side to that. You could be all about relationships and not want to make a whole lot of money. And then, that defines you, and that defines the businesses you work in, and that defines how you approach problems that you encounter. And that's what really is driving your path. But it's very invisible. You can't really see it. And that's when looking back, you really see the dots all connect.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? When you're sitting there at your desk or you're driving your car and you suddenly realise what you should be doing with your life, and you find what everyone has said is your unique self, your authentic self. It is one of those moments for anyone who's become successful. I've done episode after episode after episode now, and literally everyone says this. Once I found my path, everything became easy. And up to that point, it was show me the money. But after that, they started to focus in on providing value to people, becoming passionate about it, creating their own path. Everything just seemed to flow. And a lot of people are saying that life should be easy, but it's our indecision and maybe our lack of focus that makes it harder than it should be.
Absolutely. I think as people in general, as a human being, you're susceptible to a lot of distraction. And the more you can focus on the one or two things that you really care about and that you're good at, and you can get really great at them, is when you really start to realize your potential and where you can become independent, so to speak.
Yeah, because this game here that I'm doing now, it's the first time ever, I think, that I've done anything and I don't really care about the money. I believe if I do it well enough, then I'm going to be rewarded. And obviously you need to pay the bills, and you got food to eat and all that kind of stuff. But it's the first time in my life that the process, the conversations, is the main thing for me. Just the fact that I'm having a conversation with you, listening to you, is just it for me. And I mentioned a couple of episodes ago to somebody, it's become like a drug. I just want to do this over and over again, and I'm not thinking about the money at all. And is that really a good state of mind, or is that becoming a bit obsessed? I don't know, but certainly it's a different way of thinking that I've ever had before.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think combine that with the need or desire to make the next one better. I hope number 30 is at least 30 times better than this episode, and it continues on that way as you learn and apply what you've learned in making a great podcast. And that's true of any business. You have to continue moving forward, trying to outdo yourself. And while there is a certain level of responsibility, you have to obviously eat and pay your bills. You'd be surprised how far you can get with so little. I mean, there were times, especially in my experience when I first started. I think my first year as a business owner, I made personally like $12,000, and I lived on that for a year, which seems insane in some aspects. But I was technically below poverty level for the United States. Well, at least close to it. And you don't need to live lavishly, and you really do realize what you need and what you don't need. As long as you're pursuing your passions and you're fulfilling yourself personally, I think it makes a much bigger difference.
What made you continue, though? You're on 12,000 for the year, and that must have been hard. And there must have been times when I don't know whether you're sitting there eating baked beans out of a can, but how did you proceed through on that path when it was obviously tough?
Yeah, I mean, dating was hard, that's for sure. And at that age, that was important to me.
Yeah.
But I proceeded because I had this, something was driving me, and I think it's similar to the feeling that you just described. You want to keep doing it. It becomes somewhat addicting. it's something that you just continue to do because you're always learning something. You're stimulated by it. You wake up in the morning thinking about it. You can't fall asleep at night because you're thinking about it, and during the day you're doing it. And that's, I mean, when you find something that does that to you, it is kind of magical, and you want to hold on to it as long as possible. And I think I continued even after leaving the first business. I continued forward because I still wanted it. I didn't want to give up that feeling. I knew that there was more to do. I knew that there was more to learn. I knew that there was more that I could achieve, and I kept going for it. And I think that's the key. You can move from industry to industry, and eventually, you find this common thread. And mine was marketing, and that's where I just continued moving forward was marketing.
How good are you in marketing? Out of all the players, are you a big person in marketing world?
I am by no means the biggest. There are a lot of people out there who are doing social media marketing well, have marketed themselves well. Even with the book, I think that there's still a lot evolving in the industry. My book especially will probably be irrelevant in the next 5 years, for the most part. There's just so much going on, and because it's changing so rapidly as we continue on, and I think there's a lot of room for other people to jump in and become, share their expertise or become experts. I would say that I've made a pretty good dent, but I'm certainly not the biggest, and I certainly won't be the last.
I bet you're the best marketing man called Merlin, though.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah,
that one's good.
You take that one because no one is going to beat you in any shape or form.
Thank you.
So where's your life going to go now? Is it going to stay on the thread of marketing, or can you see a new dot in the horizon that might change your path?
Well, like I had mentioned, I would love to at some point make money with my hobby, but that comes with marketing. I don't think marketing is ever going to leave. I think at this point I would be a good business owner. I could run a business well, having learned so much from my history. But I still love the marketing part. And when I think about, how I can distribute or create new products or brands, it always boils down to what can I do as a marketer. So someone else will still have to be there to do the administrative, run the processes. I'm still not the greatest salesperson that I could be, so I'll probably always need help with that. But marketing will be there. I just don't know, again, what industry that might be.
But do you need help to be a salesman? Because this is something that's been coming across in lots of conversations. Some people call it the Superman syndrome, where being an entrepreneur, you try to do everything equally as well. Is it better not to just go, look, I'm really good at marketing, I'm going to become unbelievable at marketing, and all the other stuff I can outsource or let other people do it for me because I'm not as good as that?
That's a good question. I think you need someone, or at least a team, to complement you on what your strengths are. So for me, I'm good at the marketing, I'm good at the branding. I'm not a designer. Have little to no creative abilities. I can think and I can recognize creative, but I can't create it. I'm too boxy in my head. Everything is square for some reason. So if it came to creating a website or creating posters or imagery, I would need someone who could do that for me. When it comes to sales, I've met some really great people who are great salespeople. But then when it comes to having the due diligence to be able to focus on the internal processes of the business, they slack a little bit. They're lacking in certain skills that keep them focused on advancing the product or designing a better product or taking the feedback and turning that into something for the business to work on, because they're so good at being social and so good at being out there and marketing the business as a salesperson. So I think naturally there's people out there that are good at certain parts of of a business. And the key, I think, is recognizing what it is that you're actually good at and finding people for the holes that you have.
I agree with that totally. There's certain parts that of this role that I'm doing now that I naturally enjoy, and I think I can naturally become very good at it. And there's other things, certainly the social media side of it, I can't get my head round it really, Merlin. It's still, to me, a lot of noise. And I know there's so many people saying to me, no, it's something that you can't sort of turn your back on. You've got to go with it. I still see the what I had for dinner tweets and Facebook posts and things like that. And sure. I struggle with the sort of balance of knowing it's the way to grow your brand and to build a community and have a profile and build those incredibly valuable relationships, to the other side of me that goes, oh, just let me talk to somebody on the mic and let somebody else do that.
Right. No, absolutely. I agree with that. And, to run a podcast, there's some key functions you have to be good at. One is you have to sound great on the mic, and you're good at that, and you're a good conversationalist, so you're good with guests. But then there's the whole scheduling guests. And I think when I signed up for yours, you had that tool that you implemented, and if you don't have that calendaring tool, someone would then have to schedule or calendar for you guests.
Schedule once.
There's exactly. So there's these pieces that help you perform. There's tools that you can implement, and if there isn't a tool and you can't build that tool for yourself, it has to be a person. And in your case, you can automate to some extent your social media parts, like the promotional parts of your past podcasts. But when it comes to having the online conversations with people, I think we might have crossed paths before our introduction on Google Plus. Somebody has to man that, and you have to be there and be part of those communities while still running your business. And if you can't do it yourself, or you're not very good at it, it's probably best to have someone who is.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for a social media person that can pretend to be me.
There you go. You wouldn't be the first, let me tell you what.
Are there some sort of major players out there, sort of big celebs, that somebody sits in a cupboard somewhere and pretends that they're Harrison Ford or something?
Absolutely. I know of many that have assistants that run their social properties while they're on stage or doing whatever they do. They have them well trained, and they sound like that person, and they believe in what those people believe, which is good. But it's not very often that those people are pushing the keys themselves.
That's a bit weird, though, isn't it? Sitting there training somebody to sort of say the responses that you would say.
I don't know. I mean, you have to consider these people are brands, and if I can tweet on behalf of brands as an agency, certainly someone else could tweet on behalf of a personal brand. Some of it has to be personalized, but when it comes to conferencing or pushing out ideas and promoting books and things like that, somebody else could easily take that over.
I have got so much to learn, Merlin. I really have. I'm going to have to start reading your book. I'm going to read it tonight before I go to bed tonight, and it's quite late, so I'm not. I'm going to read it tomorrow. Just before I let you go, the very last part of the show is the Sermon on the Mic, and this is the bit where I send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. So if you did walk into a room and you met young Merlin, what would you say to him? What kind of advice would you give to him about how to lead his life? Or perhaps, as like some guests, they don't want to say anything at all. So I'm going to press the music, sit back and listen as Merlin Ewald goes on the mic. This is a Sermon on the Mic.
Oh, Merlin.
Here we go with the best bit of the show. The Sermon on the Mic. The Sermon on the Mic.
So what would I tell myself? Well, at risk of changing the future, I'm not going to do the cop-out. I wouldn't say anything to myself. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think the main thing would be to find more people to give you advice and ask more questions would be the first part. The second part would be to take more opportunities to travel and get out of your comfort zone, to go see more of what makes the world run in any aspect, whether that's traveling for leisure or simply going to the neighboring city or the next state to see a business and see how it runs. Because in the years that I have had since, I've learned quite a bit about industry and running businesses and different aspects of those that would have been very important to know and could have certainly accelerated my growth, having learned that before. And I think the other thing was, as a young person, I was hesitant to read books. I didn't find them enjoyable. I didn't really understand it, but I would say jump on the audiobook sooner than you had, so that you can learn more and accelerate that learning to get where you are today faster. So what kind of a bump might that give me? I might be 5 years ahead of where I am if I had that advice now. But knowing me, I was pretty stubborn. I probably wouldn't listen to myself anyway.
Well, hopefully you would, because there's good advice there, and I think one of the main ones, and it's been astonishing for me, is to ask for help. And generally, if you ask in the right way, people will help you, won't they?
Absolutely. I wish I was more aware of that as a young person. I knew it, but I didn't really know it. I didn't realize what that meant. So I think I just moved forward knowing that if I ever had a question, I could ask somebody, but I never knew that I had questions. And obviously I did. I was too in my own head to realize what questions I didn't know, and I should have been asking more questions as a young person. But I do that now, which is good.
Well, I suppose you don't know what you don't know until you find out that you don't know it.
Exactly.
I don't really understand what I said there, but it sounded good anyway. Merlin You-Ward. Well, what's U for in the name?
Oh, that is a horrendous middle name that only a few close friends of my wife know.
Oh, okay. I wondered if it was on Facebook you couldn't have two Merlin Wards or something, so you slipped an initial in just to sort of...
Oh, well, kind of. It is actually my name, and it is actually the initial. But to that point, when I first started Googling, I Googled my known name, and there was one other fairly relevant Merlin Ward in the world, actually in the UK, and he's a screenwriter. And I wanted to beat him on Google. And as I tried hard and hard and hard to SEO my name into the first ranked spot, I was always like second or third behind this guy because he had movies and he was on IMDb, etc. So I just threw in the U, and now I am the only one that shows up.
If you Google my name, I come up as the professor of male impotence.
Well, that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, yeah. And I get so many emails asking for help. Or maybe that's just from my wife, I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, Merlin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You've been so open and generous and, of course, talkative. And as I say to all the guests, please come back in the future to share your history going forward, because I believe that by joining up our dots and connecting our paths, we really do have the best opportunities to build our future. Merlin You-Ward, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.